Out this discussion now from Doha. I'm joined by Sultan Barakat. He's the founding director of the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. And in Riyadh, we have Saudi Affairs Specialist Ahmed Alibrahim. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Ahmed, let me begin with you. You just heard me speaking to Qatar's ambassador to Australia. He's saying 1 year on, they're the losers. We are still in our place. All 13 points are void. He's confident that Qatar is still strong 1 year on. What do you think?
I think he's absolutely wrong. I think if you check the balance and if you bring the Morgan Stanleys and the McKinseys and the PwC, they're going to tell you the facts. What happened to Qatar in the past year? What happened to Qatar Airways? What happened to the all foreigner people who's in Qatar? What happened to their GDP? How many billions and billions of dollars they actually acquired in bonds? The whole economy went down. I'm not a financial guy. Qatar is hurting. And you know, we have 13 mandates for Qatar to accept. We are not asking them to be our you know, little kitty that we take out. We are telling them to be a full-fledged country that respects the international communities, that stop funding terrorism, to stop funding everybody who actually shake up the GCC countries, and from Morocco to Iraq to Iran to Syria to Qaeda to Hezbollah to Houthis. They are all over the place. They are a big web. So what happened in the past year, actually, when we shed the light on Qatar, a lot of advancement actually happened in Qatar. They are more into terrorism than before. They are less in funding terrorism than before. They are actually trying to come up and talk to leaders in the world and try to come up from their dirty closets into the light a little bit. This is what the four countries are doing who actually applied the blockade in Qatar. We share a lot of social fabric with the Qatari people. We feel pity for them. It's a country with $400 billion and 300,000 population. They have a lot of money, yes, right. But that's not the case. Why the blockade has happened.
Okay, so
it's about national security.
Let's take what you said. So, Sultan, Ahmed making the point, he's saying even though the Qataris are not playing ball with the 13 points, 1 year on, maybe inadvertently, they've stopped some of the behavior that the Saudis don't like. So that's seen as a success, and the Qatari economy has been weakened. Is that how you see it, Sultan?
I don't think there's been any success in this episode. I don't think, and I'm really surprised to hear anyone from Saudi Arabia claiming that Qatar hurting is a good thing, or any other Arab country. This whole thing has been disastrous for everyone concerned. It is true that there has been a large, considerable financial cost for Qatar in this, but it's also true that this expenditure has, in fact, helped Qatar consolidate itself, particularly in terms of its internal front. I think, by and large, the population has mobilized around its emir, and if anything, the situation, the conditions inside are stronger than ever before, and as such, they are much more determined not to give up on any aspect of their sovereignty. Which is what the Saudis and the other boycotting countries are requiring.
Right.
Regionally, I think Qatar is probably in a stronger position as well. It's not only Qatar who's concerned about the strange, some would say erratic behavior of Saudi Arabia over the last few years. Kuwait is worried, Oman is worried. Of course, now with the Americans withdrawing from the Iran deal, there's a major concern. So the concerns that Qatar faces are not only limited to Qatar. There are many other countries in the Gulf who are concerned, and beyond the Gulf. You know, the policies that they pursued in Lebanon with holding the prime minister, the current policies with Jordan, you can see Jordan
there's a bunch of things here.
Is on the edge of failing, and the policy that the Saudis are applying to it. So aside from the war in Yemen and so on, so there is a major, I think, bigger question that the Saudis need to address, of which Qatar is only one aspect of it, and it's very difficult for
allow me to bring
us to
Ahmed
quite understand why all of this is taking place.
Okay, I want him to respond to this. So, Ahmed, Sultan's saying, you guys have just strengthened them. They've consolidated, they've become more self-sufficient, they've become more confident in their policies. They've got options, perhaps with Tehran and Ankara and so forth. It has backfired, hasn't it?
Didn't backfire, actually. Again, Qatar it's a tiny problem. It's our least of our problems. We have a bigger problem. We have Iran. We have the war in Yemen. We have our brothers and sisters in Syria. We have Iraq. We have a lot of things. And I'm not going to throw the book on Mr. Sultan and bring some information from WikiLeaks or anything like that. I'm talking facts over here. Qatar, it's a very minor problem. The only sympathy we have for Qatar, it's the Qatari citizens who are suffering because of all that. If the Qatari people actually went on their emir just because he hired his own personal bodyguards from the Revolutionary Guard from Iran, or he actually takes 6,000 military personnel from Turkey to support him and to get him his security, I'm not going to answer in that way. I'm going to leave the record actually correct itself when we go further. If he's saying that on the first year, I doubt if they're going to continue with this blockade, we're going to hear of a country called Qatar in 5 years, because it will not survive. I hope the Qatari emirs and the Qatari government comes to the unity of the GCC countries, come to Kuwait, come to Bahrain, come to Sultanate Oman, come to Saudi Arabia. The GCC countries going to continue. Qatar is irrelevant to the GCC.
So let's ask
contribute
Sultan.
Except Satan,
Sultan,
or they never
Sultan, there's a
actually
point.
did any proactive anything.
Ahmed, let me ask him. So Sultan, within 5 years, Ahmed's saying, if Qatar continues down this path, it won't even exist. Maybe it'll be swallowed up by its neighbors. The GCC will survive, Qatar will not. Is that even plausible in your eyes?
Look, I'm not here to defend the position of Qatar, but listening to my friend Ahmed, this is the core of the problem, is the rhetoric that he and other analysts have been throwing around. There are very few facts that are being addressed objectively. To say, for example, that the Emir has Revolutionary Guard securing him, or I don't know, 6,000 Turkish soldiers are based in Qatar. This is all nonsense. The Turkish troops in Qatar do not exceed 400, and they're largely training troops. The average age is probably 35 or so, and they are limited in what they can do. What is important for Qatar is the link to Turkey. So it's Turkey's commitment to stand by Qatar internationally, as other countries have also expressed their commitment to do the same. Now, looking into the future, I think just objectively and looking at it from a distance, probably Saudi Arabia faces much greater threats than Qatar does in the coming few years. I fully accept and agree that Mohammed bin Salman has a very good reform program, and it is a reform program that is badly needed, but it is a reform program that has not been pursued or implemented in the most logical way. In fact, if the Saudis are successful in what they're trying to do today, then at best they produce a Qatar. What they're looking to do is to achieve what the Qataris have achieved in terms of balancing conservatism and liberal economics, in terms of focusing on industry, diversifying their economy and so on. So I don't think any of the Gulf countries will come out of this crisis victorious. And certainly talking about any one of them disappearing altogether is not the case.
Okay.
What is on the table is the possibility of upheaval in the region as a whole because of the tension that is growing with Iran. And the most logical reaction from Saudi Arabia would be to consolidate the Gulf front. So it's about, instead of dividing it, so Sultan, they should really try to bring them together to stand up for Iran.
Okay. So, Ahmed, given the tensions with Iran, now that the US has pulled out of the Iran deal as well, doesn't it make more sense diplomatically to have a country like Qatar involved at the table who can be a conduit or some sort of mediator when it comes to the GCC countries, the Iranians and everybody else? Why all the division? Why not use the Qataris and their leverage?
Well, we have a traditional negotiator in between from the GCC country and the Sultanate Oman. Again, Qatar is much thinner than what everybody thinks. I'm surprised by what your guest said, Mr. Sultan. I think if you check with the Trends Research Center in Bruxelles, they're going to give you all the data of how many millions and billions of dollars that Qatar actually have given to the terrorist organization like the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. I mean, look, when we start the blockade, like the first week, 10 days, ISIS has went to a shattered pieces. Let's not forget the money that they gave to the royal family
Ahmed,
to free them from Iraq.
You can't seriously,
and all that went.
So
anyway,
you can't honestly say there's a correlation between the blockade and ISIS losing power. There's absolutely no data to show that Qatar,
the date,
the blockade on Qatar
centers,
and ISIS
and
losing land and power.
the link between Qatar. Fine. Check with Al-Shabaab in Somal. See how many hundreds of millions has Qatar gave to those Al-Shabaab terrorist organization. Look at all the secret meetings that happens in Turkey between the Qataris and the counterparts to fund all these terrorist groups secretly. All these are on the record. It's not with Saudi Arabia, it's not with me, it's not with the 4 countries who did the blockade. All you have to do, go to the research center at send the record. Now, if you're hard on the side of Qatar, this is something that I cannot control. But again, we have Sultanate Oman. They are the traditional mediator between us and between Iran. Iran, it is a problem with Iran. Iran is a way that we are trying to do it through the international community, through our traditional ally, which is the United States. We would like to come to a peace in the region. Qatar, through all the time that they were with us in the GCC, one of the mandates that the GCC countries signed that we don't have a relationship with our enemy that actually destabilized the region. And we found that half of the resolution of the GCC countries being passed to the Revolutionary Guard and to the country. So Qatar, it won't help at this stage.
Okay, I got to move on. Sultan, Ahmed, I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers.